Games get previewed by journalists in magazines and on websites all the time. But not all of those games are released. Some of these projects get canned or get an extreme makeover and become something completely different. Thankfully, there's this thing called the internet, where information and data that was once considered lost can suddenly appear again. Together, we will take a look at 10 lost games that were discovered after decades. The most famous example in this list is of course Starfox 2. The sequel to a fan-favorite game was basically finished when Nintendo management decided to can the project. Around that time, Nintendo was about to launch a new console, and they didn't want to take away attention from the Nintendo 64. Starfox 2 disappeared, only to be found in the dark caves of the internet years later. Fans of the series had been playing the game on emulators for a couple of years already when Nintendo decided to embrace the legacy of Starfox 2. They officially launched the game 22 years after its official reveal in 1995. The game is now playable on the Super Nintendo Classic Mini. What a great way to release a forgotten game. With the launch of the remake of Resident Evil 2 ahead, the story of Resident Evil 1.5 is suddenly relevant again. Originally, the sequel for the first Resident Evil would have the same camera angles and tell two separate stories. The horror game wasn't that detailed, allowing many zombies on screen. First footage was shown in 1996. Eventually, this version of the game would be replaced by one that became Resident Evil 2. It would take until 2013 for this early build of Resident Evil 2 to leak illegally. Fans were thrilled to have access to this piece of Resident Evil history and called it Resident Evil 1.5. If you think downloading online games is something new, you're wrong. In the mid-90s, Nintendo released a satellite modem peripheral for the SNES. This was only released in Japan. You needed to tune into a transmission at a certain time to play a game on your system. But the 10 Kirby's Toy Box minigames were special because they could be stored on a special memory card. The Video Game History Foundation got their hands on a couple of the ROMs from the minigame collection in 2016 for $750 in an auction, but they're still missing Kirby's Toy Box Ball Rally. We all know Rayman as that armless Ubisoft mascot that gained popularity in the 90s when he got his first game on the PlayStation 1. But this famous game character was supposed to release a few years earlier on the Super Nintendo. Lead game developer Michel Ancel shared the first screenshots of the project in October 2016 on his Instagram account, and a few months later, another developer shared a playable build of the game on Dropbox. Almost 26 years after Ancel and his team worked on the game, everybody could suddenly play it. All you need to do is download the file and get an emulator running on your phone or PC. Keep in mind though, this is a true work in progress and not a complete game. Because of the success of the first Resident Evil, Capcom wanted to make a variety of ports of the game. Plenty have been released, but eventually the version for the Game Boy Color was canned. This version had an easier save game feature and more enemy variety. But it was still the same game, featuring Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine. In 2000, 1 year after the development started, Capcom canceled the project. In 2012, the ROM files were leaked, giving gamers access to an interesting take on one of the best horror games of all time. In 1998, Electronic Arts was about to release a violent fighting game called Thrill Kill. It featured dismemberment, fetish outfits, and violent special moves. EA got ownership over Thrill Kill because it bought over another gaming company. The publisher deemed the game too violent and canned the project, even though development was basically done. Almost a decade later, former developers of the game released an almost finished build on the internet. We guess they did it for the thrill. In June, about 70 long-lost Japanese video games leaked onto a private torrent website. Among those games was Labyrinthe Horror Tour 3. This game was thought to be lost forever after its release in 1998, since the series was only released in Japan anyway. Many preservation organizations and collectors didn't even know about the game, making its appearance even more mysterious. An anonymous collector uploaded the pack of 70 games to Mega Upload, and he threatened to delete the folder if the game showed up anywhere else online. The game Bioforce Ape was teased in a Nintendo Power magazine in 1991, but got cancelled 1 year later. The game was about a mutated ape that kicked some serious ass. But despite rumors and years of discussion, the game was nowhere to be found. That is, until it suddenly showed up in an auction in March 2010. Almost 2 decades after its reveal in a magazine, the world got its hands on a working ROM of Bioforce Ape. It turned out to be fully playable, even though the game is kinda short. Let's be honest here, we all love action heroes. Our team has a sweet spot for 90s heroes like Arnold, Sly, Claude, Chuck, and of course Steven. Steven Seagal is the final option is an unreleased action game based on his movies. The game was revealed in the summer of 1993 and was supposed to be released 1 year later. Because of delays, the game never got released. Every follow-up project eventually got canned as well. 15 years after its reveal, a prototype of the Super Nintendo game reached a collector who made a ROM dump available online. Steven Seagal as the final option is not fully playable and was supposed to feature a co-op mode. All we have now is Seagal doing what he does best, and that's being the final option when it comes to kicking ass. Ecco was once an iconic video game character on the Sega Genesis, and this dolphin also got a game on the Sega Dreamcast and PlayStation 2. You control Ecco the dolphin who has to save Atlantis and travel through time. Developers were working on Ecco 2 Sentinels of the Universe, but the project was canned when the Dreamcast suddenly got discontinued in 2001. It took the game preservation community 15 years to find a ROM of the unfinished game. Ecco 2 Sentinels of the Universe was found on the Dreamcast development kit. If you're interested, the prototype can be played on Dreamcast emulators available for PC. There are definitely some games in this list we would have liked to play on their originally intended console. We still think it's awesome that Nintendo brought back Starfox 2, and perhaps other companies should embrace this concept and officially release long-lost games in a playable status. Who's with us?